Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Survivor 50 Wishlist podcast, an off-season series where we are picking who could and should come back for a future returnee season on Survivor 50. Today, we are done with the first all-star batch of seasons. Now for something completely different, even though it is using a previous theme. We are going to Survivor Vanuatu, Islands of Fire. People are complaining there's no themes nowadays, but back in our day, there used to be two themes, arguably, considering the subtitles that they would randomly attach to some seasons, as we'll be talking about everything from the 9th season of Survivor. Of course, I am not alone. I am joined by a Survivor fan, a Survivor alum. Listen, he can't climb a ladder, but he can climb a greased up pole to get a totem at the top. Like nobody's business. It is the great Brandon Donlon.
I would have been much like, I believe, Sarge, who kind of ducks. Like Brady's behind him, and he's like, no, you meant Brady, right? Yeah, listen, Vanuatu is one of my favorite seasons of the program. It was never talked about in any pregame interviews until season 45, and I'm not even the one that brought it up. Jake, I was so shocked when I got home to hear that Jake's talking about Vanuatu. So I have never been able to talk about Vanuatu publicly, obviously. So I'm thrilled to be here to dive into the 18 most interesting people that have ever played Survivor.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued to talk about this season because I agree that it is quite underrated. I think, stop me if you heard this before, Brandon, especially in the wake of something like Survivor 46. I feel like the first half is probably a little slow. There's some interesting blind sides, but it's a bit more of a slow burn. But then once it gets to that second half, it catches, for lack of a better term, fire. And then it culminates in one of the most unlikely wins, I think, when you look at, on paper, someone overcoming a 6-1 deficit up against one of the most powerful women alliances in Survivor history. Chris Daugherty was able to do the impossible. So we're going to talk all about Chris, all about the people he vanquished along the way, and so much more. But yeah, for many reasons, Vanuatu is definitely one of the less regarded seasons of Survivor. Probably doesn't help that it is one of the seasons that features the least amount of returnees, only 2. And part of that is due to some circumstances around it. First, the timing. This is the first season to follow a big all-returnee season of Survivor. And say what you want to about All-Stars, I think it really ramped up this enthusiasm for the show to the point where you kind of wonder, okay, does the show go out on season 8? Wild to think about in retrospect, but a lot of people weren't necessarily looking ahead to what's next. And if they were asking, how the hell are you going to top that? So when you find out, okay, it's 18 players, it's all new players after these all returnees, we're going back to the old Battle of the Sexes theme. It wasn't exactly someone that had a theme that had everyone's ears perked up. On top of that, and something we will certainly get into, this was not a well-liked season at the time. Chiefly because we did get something rather unprecedented and something that would be repeated, obviously, 7 seasons later to great effect in the Black Widow Brigade. This ultra-powerful women's alliance really running the table for the middle part of the game. And then it all falling apart when the one guy in the final 7 takes it in the end. I know certainly in the moment, Jeff Probst was not a big fan of the season, though we can talk about how those reasons may have differed over the years as well. The audience wasn't. But Brandon, I totally agree with you in that I think if you take a closer look out of the realm of the fall of 2004, I think Vanuatu really holds up.
It's good. It's really good. Now, I had watched it for the first time in 2008. Back in the day when I was watching Survivor for the first time, I got in at Cabone. The only way to watch comfortably, you could watch in snippets on YouTube, but you had to buy the DVDs. There were DVDs that were out. Vanuatu was one of the only officially released seasons on DVD. So I got that and I watched it 100. It was good in 2008, I thought. And it's still to this day, obviously, if you want to skip the pre-merge, you want to fast forward through episodes 2 through 7, sure. But once you hit the merge, we're on fire. And I do believe that my favorite all-time episode of Survivor is the Surprise and Surprise Again, which is the family visit where Leanne ultimately ends up going home. Just because of the power shifts that happen there, seeing Chris and his wife, Lori, in the challenge, Chris being like, I'm going to go home. I need you to know I'm going to go home. And knowing that he kept it up when he got home and told Lori that he did go home that night. And then once the episode came up, he's like, oh, I made another week and then another week and another week. I think it's the whole back half is perfect. And there's, there is a there are points for everybody in that back half to come back. Maybe the first half a little bit slower, but you get a really, really compelling group of people, and just seeing the social dynamics and what Chris can dismantle by himself. He doesn't have, Chad, or he doesn't have Sarge to help him do that. He kind of puts the pieces in motion to get people to turn against each other. It's for what I love Survivor. I love social. I love watching social. And Chris is he's the best in the biz. He's really good. And he's a bullshitter. And they said it there, and it's delicious to me. And I love it. So I cannot wait to talk about the ins and outs of all the folks that were there.
Well, listen, let's stay on the subject of the man, the myth, the legend. Let's start with our top two here. And they're both really interesting candidates to talk about in their own right. But let's start with the winner himself in Chris Daugherty, because I feel kind of bad that this man's legacy has been a bit forgotten in the regard for his season at the time, because what an incredibly skilled player in the art of deception. There are so many times during this season, Brandon, where I just kind of throw my hands up, especially in the moment where I was like, all in on this women's alliance, take that last guy out, right it to the end, etc., etc. Just saying, how are you believing the bullshit he is shoveling right now?
Yeah.
And he just kept going with it. He was able to take advantage of the large cracks that were going on within the women's alliance that was really exposed from the very beginning of the game, this age division between, the young bucks and the old heads, and being able to then broker a Final Four alliance that took the game by storm, but still then becoming the swing vote at the Final Five and cutting Julie and cutting Eliza, but then delivering, to your point, one of the best Final Tribal Council performances I've ever seen for a winner, up there with Todd, up there with Marianne, where Chris has a lot to answer to. And yes, he is up against somebody that we'll talk about that definitely is able to help build the case for him as well, considering the stuff that she has done. But the fact that he doesn't necessarily take the tactic of I'm going to own up to this and show you why I deceived you all like some winners had. Instead, he is quite literally hat in hand. He says oh, I can't believe I had to do that to you. We have a really great relationship. He, even before Yule, brings the props to Final Tribal Council. And as a result, he ends up winning handily. And I think the expletive he lets out of F yeah after he wins at the reunion is a nice microcosm of just everything he was able to bring to that electric second part of the game.
Well, and for me, I said this when I did pregame interviews, I said this on the island, my favorite players of Survivor are the folks that on paper, you're not thinking are going to get this far. I mean, it's one of the reasons I love Dancing with the Stars. It's I love seeing celebrities who don't otherwise dance go on and be really good. And if you look at Chris on paper, you wouldn't think that he has this, sixth gear in him to be able to pull these things off. I mean, right before the Final Tribal Council, telling Twiila,
yep,
we're not going to take their shit tonight. We're going to go back at him. And then, Twila's next to him doing exactly that while Chris is he lost it. And I don't think I could ever think of something like that. And I don't think most people can. I think he just has a secret gear that really lended itself well to this, bottom half of the game, especially after almost going home on day 3. He was,
right.
Some of us are not good at the first challenge or the first couple of challenges. He blew it for his team. He went back and then he made a plan, and that, that group that he made carried him obviously through the first half. But even still, he doesn't ever have that opportunity to be really good at the second half if he doesn't recover in the first. So he is one of the best in the biz. And I know, he was not called for Winners of War. I think he had, I've heard him say, I forget where, he never got so much as an email. He knew it was happening because I think Aris maybe called him and told him it was happening. They have not had any interest in the past 20 years of the show since he won of having him back on. And I think that sucks. And I understand. I don't believe that Jeff was a huge fan when it happened. I don't think he was a huge fan afterward. I think there were many reasons at play for that. But it does suck because we are missing somebody who really could bring a ton, to especially a new era of the game. Who knows how this person does? Because this person isn't on the new era of the game. This person doesn't exist in the new era of Survivor. So, what we're leaving on the table, it does, it sucks.
So I guess the question is, what are the chances of us taking it off the table? Because, I think a lot that we're going to talk about with this cast in particular is Jeff Probst is unfeasibly, in charge of the show right now. So I think it's going to be tough to get people on without sort of getting past him. And it's not like he has a personal dislike of Chris the way that like he might have for a Johnny Fairplay in the past. It seems like from what we kind of glean, it was more so he was the winner of this season that happened to see, who would become his girlfriend getting voted out. So he wasn't happy about that. And then the opinion on the season sort of reverses yet stays the same, where it's like, okay, that is more so me looking back on a portion of my life that I don't necessarily want to remember again. So let's not bring people back. I also know that there was some rumors that maybe Chris had some health issues going on. I don't know. As someone who was maybe a bit more tuned into the pulse of Chris Daugherty, is that pulse still active?
I believe that, and again, far be it for me to make assumptions, but just having, for a little bit of background here, I used to post rather incessantly about Chris in like Survivor Facebook groups when I was 11, 12, 13. And I got in contact with him and his wife. They requested me, my mom, so we send Christmas cards to each other every
Aw.
year. When I got on Survivor, they were the first people that I called after I got the call from Caitlin. I'm a big fan. Like they're really great people. So I think that the health issues that were in question, I think were maybe a little bit exacerbated by like Reddit and the internet, people trying to rationalize why he maybe did not get called. I do know that if the opportunity came up for Winners of War, he would have been ready. Like there's
Oh,
there's
okay.
no doubt he would have gone and been ready. I don't think he had any health issues that were, preventing him from going should that call have came. But I'm hoping, again, listen, when I think of season 50, I think when we all think of season 50, with the very little details that we've gotten from Jeff is this is, a celebration of the 25 first years of the show, right? This is 18 to 20 people who like eat, sleep, breathe Survivor, and they represent what Survivor is to Jeff. I don't know if Chris is that to Jeff. I know that
Right.
Chris is that for me. Chris is on my Mount Rushmore for sure. I would hope that like, in the planning meetings that they have, I hope Chris's, headshot comes across the table and they have some kind of plan. If they are bringing back maybe a group of winners, who knows? Chris is one of the only folks from the first 10, from the first 20 that haven't gotten a chance to run it back. Who wants to? There are some folks who in that first 20 who maybe don't want to, take part again, but Chris would go. I know he would go. So that's, here's to hoping that it could happen.
Chris also should be noted is 53. And I think this is something that you and I actually talked about beforehand, that I think we sometimes conflate both tribes on Vanuatu here. I mean, look at Lepevi the same way we look at Yasser of like, oh yeah, Lepevi was divided by age. I would say it was maybe a bit more divided by like, the pretty boys and then sort of the outcasts outside of it, because Chris is the same age as Brady. I think he's like a couple years older than JP. Like,
Yeah.
he was not necessarily one of these old heads like some of the guys in the quote unquote Fat Five around him.
Yeah. Between JP, between Brady, between Chris, between Chad, they all have 2 years in between, and then you see them at tribal council and there's this huge divide that we're seeing. But the divide was maybe more of like a, who naturally would have clicked with who kind of looks like whoever. But it's an interesting thing to think about, again, that saves Chris, that group of five, the Fat Five, as they coined it, that saves Chris in that first tribal council, which gives him the opportunity to run the table here. But, listen, 53 is a good age. We're not getting a ton of over 50s in the new era, but
listen, we have Jerry on the ballot. She is exactly 53. He's 1 year older than Sean Rector, also on the ballot, only a few years older than Johnny Fairplay. So yeah, I would say definitely especially compared to some of the other people we put on, a pretty good age here.
Yeah, definitely. And listen, I hope we see it.
All right, well, let us, much like Chris did on day 39, gas up Twiila Tanner here, because what's so interesting about this middle era of Survivor to me, which I connotate despite the fact that it is now within the first third of the show in retrospect, are these like end game tragic figures where we see someone come to power and then kind of fall on their own sword in the way that like their own moralistic difficulties end up undoing them. And the big three I can really think of that fill that capacity are Ian from Palau, Dreams from Fiji, and Twiila, who really is a big power broker throughout the season. This big flip that ends up happening at the final 7, she seems to be one of like the big turnkeys to do that, of course, because she infamously promised Amy and Leanne that she swore on her son she would never betray them. And indeed, she does. And the game kind of breaks from there, both wide open. And I think for her, and I think what people love and what I love about Twiila is just how unabashedly herself she is. This was a very blue collar type of season. And I feel like even more than Chris, Twiila really represented that in terms of like, take no bullshit, right? Like she's working with Eliza, but then she's arguing with Eliza back at camp. Twyila was somebody that didn't necessarily let sleeping dogs lie. And what's interesting that we should talk about is that Twyila has been in consideration for a number of returnee seasons. I believe she at least was thought of for fans versus favorites. I know she was heavily considered for heroes versus villains to the extent where I believe she might have gone out there as an alternate. I think she was briefly considered for blood versus water, which would have been amazing if she played alongside the very son whose life she swore on. So unlike Chris, it doesn't seem like they've lost Twyla's number in the intervening years.
For sure. And excuse me, you can see why. I mean, you get like Twyila, at the reward challenge for when they have the family visit, Twyila doesn't know how to type. And it's the fall of 2003. Twyila is from another world than a lot of the folks that were playing with her are. And I think that came out, and like you have folks in all of these shows, especially now with social media, who are like, afraid of their perception on TV a little bit, maybe holding back just a tad. Twyila is not holding back even for a second, and again, there are not people like Twyila. I mean, one of the critiques that has been floated on Reddit, on the internet, of the new era casting is there aren't enough blue collar workers on the new era. Like, this is the blue collar worker on Survivor. Like, you can't,
all you need to do is attach a collar to the current cast photo she has, and she's quite literally blue collar.
Blue collar. She's she's on the tribe with the Nagarote. What was that tribe?
Yeah, Nagarote. No, yeah. I think it was Eskameka. Is the
Eskameka? I'm sorry. I lost my super fan card. But yeah, this is like, and again, I knew that. I think she was in fans versus favorites contention when it was going to be 20 returning players, and then maybe got cut when that 10 got swapped. I knew that, the blood versus water thing, obviously, I believe her son's name is James. I would love a Twyila return. I would love a Twyila return, spoiler alert, for more than anybody on this cast. I think that Twyila is so fascinating. In the event that 50 is like a second chance or a something, Twyila is one of the first names that I feel like I pull from the first 10 seasons of the show, of like, one would go and two would be really, really fun and interesting to watch. I mean, imagine Twyila like interacting with Emily. Like, imagine Twyila interacting with some of the titans of the new era. I mean, it tickles me. I can't believe that could even be a possibility. So Twyila, I think I cannot say enough high about her, and going in wanting to win. And then, like, Ian is the perfect one-to-one, is like, Twyila didn't win because of Twyila. It's like Jeff says at the beginning of season 46, is like, some of you can't win because it's you. It's not this group, it's you. Twyila is a great example of that, more so than other people are, I feel like, where she, Twyila is the reason Twyila lost. It's not the jury. Like, Twyila couldn't, Twyila couldn't hang. But maybe with 20 years of difference, with 20 years of life experience, maybe she can. Maybe, I don't know if she still watches. I don't know if she's
that's my major question, is to go back to an earlier point. Do you think she would want to go back? I mean, I know that, I guess the fact that she wanted to sign on to those other seasons is a good sign. She also did do an episode of like Celebrity Fear Factor post Survivor with actually Johnny Fairplay, where they got DQ'd because Johnny Fairplay just like partied all night and couldn't do the challenges. So I guess she's not necessarily one of these people to be like, yep, Survivor did not have a great experience, I'm moving on. It seems like, at least the last time we checked in with her, which was some time ago, but still, she would be up for doing it, depending on how everything shakes out.
I think so. And again, like with 20 years of age, she would now, I believe, is 61, 62.
61 years old, which would put her right in line with some of the other people we put, like Rupert, who is 60 on there. Lex is 60 as well, a couple years younger than Tina and Gretchen.
For sure. And with the season 50, I mean, the age, I mean, obviously this has been covered in the first 8 episodes of this, but the age spread is going to be quite a bit. I mean, there is no doubt in my head, we are going to get people from this era of the show. People who have been talked about in the first 8 episodes of this series, including maybe this one, are going to be there, so I don't think 61 is too far out of contention. I think, right now, season 47, I know, Mike, you cannot comment on it, but somebody in the preview says they're 59, 59, 61, they can play, they can hang. So I'm hoping for Twyila.
All right, well, let's move on. And perhaps, speaking of someone who is wise beyond her years, we can talk about our jury here, starting with, of course, Scout Cloud Lee. We have, of course, the two-time players of this season in Eliza and Amy. In between them is, of course, Julie Berry, a berry sandwich, if you will. We have Leanne, one of the more forgotten members, I would say, of the Women's Alliance, but still seminal to this season in what her boot does. We have Chad, the first amputee to compete on Survivor. And then we have Sarge, who Chris promised he'd burn them all after he voted him out. And indeed, he did. So let's start with these returnees, these people we've already seen play the game. So, Eliza, big character in both of her seasons. I mean, despite the fact that she goes mid-game in Micronesia, she is the person behind, I would say, one of the most iconic lines in the series history, to the point that in the Survivor 46 after show, they actually make reference to it. And I do think that helps buoy it along as well. Of course, she's also participated in the Amazing Race as well. So I think that I know, I agree that I would love to see Twiila back. I do think if we are picking who's the most likely person from Vanuatu to return, I think it's going to be Eliza.
No doubt. I think that, right now, I don't know the stats, but like it's a effing stick clip, I think has been maybe more times on the show with the necklace, the Eric necklace,
Oh, really?
than
Oh, that
any other clip. I mean, I
yeah.
think that, in the event that 50 is like a Legends, like when I can see the clip montage of the Legends when they have at the 49 finale, I see this clip. I see that, like, I can see it. I do think in terms of likelihood, Eliza definitely is, a contender to be on that season. And you know what? In the new era, nobody has been more adaptable and given such grace to the new format changes as Eliza has. So, 26 days, it was day 17 after Chet got bought. We don't know, so
Yeah.
listen, let's all try it. Let's all, maybe 26 days is harder. We don't know.
That's the thing. Listen, we're not anything if not a little trolly here on Rob Has a Podcast. And how amazing would it be that for Eliza, someone who has been perhaps at the biggest forefront of like Survivor's not the same anymore, 26 days just don't hit the same way it used to be, to put her in, even without the day limit, like a new era-esque setting, could be an incredible example from a TV perspective of like, be careful what you wish for.
For sure. And again, like folks who are like Eliza, who have a similar personality to Eliza, they go really far in the new era. And some of them do not at all, right? Like it's a full spectrum. So wherever Eliza ends up on that, who's to say? But I do see in a 50 scenario where, Jeff comes in the room and he's like, we're doing Legends. It's Legends. And they have, 20 people from the first 25 years of the show, obviously. Eliza's a name. Eliza's a name you're throwing out. No doubt. Before lunch, Eliza's name is thrown out. So I do think in terms of likelihood here, Hundo P, Eliza would likely be considered for a return venture, the third return venture.
Yeah, so as we throw out Eliza's name before lunch, let's talk about somebody who ate this season, as they like to say, in Amy. And I feel like Amy, like Chris and like Twiila, is another person that has kind of been forgotten to the test of time. She does come back from Micronesia, but respectively certainly has a very low-key season. She has admitted on Talking with T-Bird that, like, she probably shouldn't have come back from Micronesia, but she didn't want to pass up the opportunity, which does make sense considering that she does not return after that. But, like, I cannot say enough about how big of a character Amy was in this season, because she was the original of her archetype, which is this, like, stone cold killer. I mean, she was like the first, I believe, openly LGBTQ plus woman. Obviously, we had Sonia that had come beforehand, but like Amy's girlfriend comes out for the loved ones visit, which was a huge deal in 2004. And the fact that Amy proved herself to be like this incredibly ruthless, at least from our perspective, sort of like the mouthpiece of this women's alliance, was so unprecedented in the history of Survivor that she really was such a focal point of the season through her boot.
Absolutely. I mean, again, you forget because, she has a very quick tenure. I mean, she's there for, I think she's the 8th person voted out.
Yeah, she makes it exactly right before. Actually, her and Eliza go back to back in Micronesia. So,
yes. And it's a very quiet tenure also. It's not a loud edit. I believe the tribal council that she leaves in is very sad. She's very upset through it. Like, it's not super fun to watch. And I admittedly haven't returned to watch her journey on Micronesia as recently as I have watched this. But when you watch this, if you watch the couple episodes, especially the merge before she goes, she is it, man. She's got the sauce. She's so good. She really, really is good. I mean, she has the qualities that like Chris needs to get to the end of the game. And I feel like once Amy's gone, Chris kind of usurps those things to execute towards the end of the game. But she really is like, she knew what she was doing. And it's unfortunate that Micronesia went the way that she did. Maybe on Heroes versus Villains or something, she has a little bit better of a tenure and makes it a little bit further. But, with all of the personalities that she's with, both fan and favorite on Micronesia, it's easy for her to get lost in the shuffle there. She just didn't have the same run. But I would love an Amy return. I believe Amy now lives in New Zealand.
Yes, she does.
She's, she is not of this country anymore. I believe now she's 51. So definitely of age to make a return appearance in the event that she wanted to. Amy's an interesting person, especially, I know this isn't what we're talking about, but in the event that Australian Survivor was doing something, she's got a little bit closer of a commute.
Hop, skip, and a jump.
Over. Yeah. She's right over there. And I think that like when I've done the math in my head about again, not what we're talking about, but the Australian Survivor all-star situation, the people that I'm picturing in my head that are going to go do that are people like Amy, who are who want to do it, who maybe aren't on the top 20, 40 list for all of the 700 people that have played Survivor. I would love to see Amy play Survivor again. And I wonder if she'd be down. I think that the opportunity is there, and I think she might jump at it. I'm not sure if it's 50, but listen, it could happen. It could happen on another franchise. We don't know.
Yeah, she did say on Talking with T-Bird, which I think she did a good amount of years ago, but she did say that she would like to, if given the opportunity. She just feels like she won't get the opportunity. So I don't think she would say no to it. And yeah, it would be really intriguing, especially now that the game has arguably gotten very quick and very cutthroat. If that sort of brazen, cut and dry, for lack of a better term, attitude that Amy had towards, Lisa makes a joke about about something, and Amy's like, nope, gotta cut her instantly. Like, I feel like that very much is an attitude rooted in something like the new era, especially something like season 46.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, she actually, like, Amy does give me a little bit of like Sabaya in a weird way, where like Sabaya was very much like, I mean, playing with her. I tweeted after she got brought out, like playing with Sabaya felt like playing with a future Survivor, right? Sabaya got cut early, but like if Sabaya lasts in the game, Sabaya is stone cold. Sabaya can do what Amy did, no doubt ski. So the opportunity to see Amy do that again, I think it only gets better. It only, I hope it happens.
The last person I want to highlight from this jury portion is somebody who, admittedly, given the Jeff of it all, I do not expect to see in contention whatsoever. But I just want to give Julie Berry her flowers, paint them on her arm, if you will, because what an incredibly underrated player, in my opinion. Is she as much of a popping personality as Eliza or Amy around her? I don't think so. But if you talk about someone who like has the chops to do well in a typical Survivor season, Julie was there. I remember there were moments when like her back was up against the wall when it was like her and Twiila nearly got swap screwed, and they just like sell each other and the other guys under the river. They promised them the sun and the moon, and then at the merge, Julie flips right back and betrays the guys. And so I do think one of the reasons why Chris ends up going with Twiila and Scout is because like you can't let Julie in to this end game. She was incredibly beloved by everybody, really nice personality, but like also had a very good head on her shoulders when it comes to gamesmanship. The thing is that obviously her and Jeff Probst were kicking it after her season for quite some time, and it did not necessarily end happily. And so, despite the fact that I think Jeff does do a pretty good job in something like Winners at War for like divorcing his own personal relationships from the job that he has to do, I think it's a little too inside to have Julie on there.
But would I love to see it? Of course. I think Julie's great. Julie really does have like, and I've talked a little bit about this on like, I think in my pregame interviews and on the podcast, some people just have like the winner aura. And not everybody who wins has the winner aura, and not everybody who has the winner aura wins, and I think Julie is somebody who just radiates that thing. And I think Julie's just winning at life. I think Julie maybe not need Survivor at the moment. I would love to see her again, but I believe she works in television production, perhaps. I think she was just I think I saw a post maybe on Reddit. People thought that she was on the Traders because I think she's in Scotland. I think she took a picture of the castle. I think maybe she's working on the Traders. Who knows? But I think Julie is fantastic. So, maybe one day in our dreams, we can all think about it. She's, one of the best. And I think from this season, a total standout. Unfortunately, extenuating circumstances would maybe prevent it from happening. But what a world we'd be in if it did.
Oh, well, it's also interesting because I think, and Brandon, you could speak to this more so than me because you've watched the season more recently. I feel like Julie is kind of what everyone labeled Parvati as for her first couple of seasons of like, here's the woman who draws people in by flirting and then cuts their throats. I mean, we do have the infamous scene, right, of like Julie sunbathing next to buck-ass naked Sarge to try to get his defenses down.
Yeah. And you know what? If Julie does, if in a world where, Jeff and Julie do not get together, and then Julie ends up on Fans versus Favorites, or Julie ends up on this mythical All-Stars 2 that was supposed to happen at 16 with 20 people. Julie is maybe a Survivor legend, right? Julie just got done the Traders. We don't know.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to think about the trajectory of where that could have gone. And unfortunately, Julie is like, from these first 10, unfortunately after 50, a lot of these first 10 season, the folks that have only been back just the one time are going to be probably forever cemented as just one-time people. And I think Julie is likely falling into that bucket. I would like to, while we're here,
Yeah.
I love Leanne. I love Leanne so much. I think Leanne is like, it's so funny that Amy has like the stone cold killer ability, but Leanne is giving a little bit like Kim Spradlin. At least she I feel like presented herself as such in the game, where maybe sure, like Amy's the one in the driver's seat, but like the charm and the suave that Kim Spradlin has, I do think Leanne had that thing. And in a different world, even if they vote out Chris at 7 and the women keep going, if Amy gets cut, I feel like Leanne is a serious winner contender there. So I just, I love Leanne.
Well, the reason why I think the Leanne boot is so big is because apparently, and we didn't necessarily see this, but like she was kind of the key behind it all with the Women's Alliance. Apparently, she was kind of the unifier between these different types of fractions that once she left, there was no way for the women to come back together. And I'll always remember like the one Leanne moment that I've committed to memory is when she's on that reward with somebody else I can't remember, but it's like, oh, I love everybody. Me too. Or maybe I'm just drunk. Me too. Like that was a very fun delivery. Leanne is also, I believe, behind the very shrewd, hey, we ate a bunch of chicken wings. I'm going to hoard them with the women and then give the men the bones to just kind of gnaw on the marrow on afterwards because they don't deserve it.
Yeah. I mean, great. I think that was, I forget what reward that was. I think that was in the for the pre-merge perhaps. But yeah, I mean, she's great. I think she's great. Again, she will be more than likely one of the people that we just look upon in the first 10 seasons of the show. Like, oh, wouldn't it have been fun to see Leanne again? But, I think I've always really, really liked her. I mean, she's famously the clip that goes viral on TikTok and Reels every couple months in the earthquake. She's the person giving the confessional mid-earthquake. So if you're a newer Survivor fan and you're listening to all these without ever seeing the seasons, if you ever see that clip,
well, sorry for the spoilers.
Listen, you already made it this far, but the guy in the Sixth Sense was dead the whole time. Let's just spoil everything. Let's just, while we're here. But Leanne is the person who's in that very famous scene where she's, in the mid confessional and the earthquake starts happening. So fun fact all around.
All right, well, let's move into maybe a pre-merge that didn't have as many shakeups. Perhaps the earthquake was the biggest one, but we can sort of talk through. Yeah. This is a chunky pre-merge, right? This is because we had 18 players and we still have a 7-person jury. This is a 9-person pre-merge, but wait until we get to Palau tomorrow. So we have Brooke, also known as Brooke Bourgeois. We have Dolly, the goat farmer, or sheep farmer, I should say, who goes the way of like the Christie swing vote gets taken out. We have John P. of solitary fame back in the day. We have Mia, victim of the first double tribal council in franchise history. Brady, the pole climber. We have Bubba, the first person to get caught doing cross tribal talk. Think about the merge. We have the aforementioned Lisa. John Kenny, the bull ride mechanic / actor model. And then we have arguably the star of this pre-merge in the form of our merge boot, Rory.
Yeah, I mean, Rory, to speak on Rory for a little bit, I think obviously next season, Palau, spoilers, you have Bobby John, who's the last spot before the jury. But I do think that Rory is, in conjunction with Bobby John, the last final person of the pre-jury who makes a huge impact to the story for a while. Like, I feel like you've got Flicka in 13. You've got, what's his name? Nick Stanbury, is that right?
Nick Stanbury in AM Panama. Yeah, I mean, the only memorable thing about him was his final words.
Yeah, which I think was a Steve Jobs quote. I feel like somebody.
I think it was, yeah.
On that. But I feel like, Rory's the star of the show. Like when I tell people to watch Vanuatu, like I tell them to just watch the merge, but really watch like after the swap. Because you really get prime Rory in the Yasser. Yasser Rory's great. When he's doing the slingshot challenge and he wins for the women and that, ends up John Kenny going home on the low heavy tribe. Like Rory is absolutely great. I don't know the full details on this, so I don't want to speak to it too much, but I do believe during the 2020 events, Rory was on a podcast where he said that he did not have the best time on Survivor Vanuatu. I don't know who were the culprits of making him feel not welcomed or using words that maybe he, did not obviously want to hear in that environment. So if anybody from this pre-merge is going to go back and do a round 2, I would love for it to be Rory. I mean, Rory would be like, Rory was a star in 2004. Imagine Rory now is just, crazy. And I do believe, I know he did a talking with T-Bird, I believe.
He did.
I'm not sure if he verbalized he wanted to go, but I would love to see it.
So he said to that point, actually, you mentioned earlier, he was like, I want to go back now in an environment where I feel like the deck is less stacked against me. And I don't even know if he was speaking about the diversity initiative more so than sort of what we were talking about before with Clarence and even Sean Rector to a certain extent, which is like, yeah, I don't want to play in a season anymore that was in the early 2000s where like certain things might have flown better in terms of casting than they do now. That being said, Rory is absolutely a star in the pre-merge. He is, one of the most kind of like indignant contestants of the season as well. Of course, I can never look at the word classless without thinking about his classless
Yeah,
delivery. So Rory was just a big part of it. And like you said, sort of like the progenitor of the Chris story, faced his own little mini arc where Bubba gets voted out immediately on the swap tribe. And it's just him against like 4 or 5 women. And he's able to outlast Lisa and he's able to win his way into the merge, where unfortunately he's dispatched after that. But Rory was such a fun character. You know, he's 55 right now, which is not particularly older on the spectrum of things. Again, these guys in the Fat Five were not the oldies on the tribe by comparison. I do think, for whatever reason, I don't necessarily see bringing him back as much as I would like a Clarence or a Gandia in terms of like, these are
for
the
sure.
players who got booted before the jury, but like have something to prove, right? Like have something to make up for. I think Rory has a really great personality and certainly could have cut a bigger swath into the game. But I also feel like maybe it's because we got so much of him
Yeah.
within those, 7, 8 episodes of Vanuatu that I'm not necessarily as hungry for it as maybe those other two.
Absolutely. I do see that. And I do think, like, again, if you just want to watch really good Survivor and you want to watch like the story of just one person, like the Rory story, not to rhyme,
There
the
we
Rory
go.
story is very good. I think it is a very nice completed arc in terms of, like, I think about, again, Rory is not Jerry Manthey, but I think about Jerry Manthey's 3-season arc of just like, hated to whatever All Stars was, or just this weird, murky, whatever, to then being like loved on Heroes versus Villains and having that completed thing. Rory gets that in 8 episodes. He has a really full story. So yeah, whether we see him for 150, likely no, but I would love to see it. And I hope that he's, I hope that he's listening. He's great.
Yeah.
He's, I really love listening to
Will
him.
he call this
Yeah.
podcast classless if we
Yeah.
don't put him on the list?
Well, it's funny. He almost burnt down the camp. He says that on the Vanuatu DVD commentary, which is the
Ooh.
thing that you listen to if you did not have sex in high school. He does say, during the commentary episodes, when I think it is the John Kenny boot, he's like, I wanted to burn that camp down. So if he knew he was going that night, he was going to burn it down. Which is, listen, we love that on Survivor. That's awesome.
And Brandon Hans looked at that and said, like, I want to play like Rory. That guy knows what's up.
Yeah, that's great.
There's, to your point, Brandon, not a lot of other highlights here. I mean, this is also when we're starting to really get into the Mactor era of
Yes.
Survivor, which surely there has been a lot of discourse nowadays as to like, why are we only bringing on super fans? Can we cast people that don't know the show again? People, the other half of that coin are the cast that we're going to get into over the next couple of weeks, where it's more so dealing with like young, attractive people that are more so maybe cast for what they're presenting on the outside and the gamesmanship they have on the inside. But I'm going to give a quick shout out to Bubba for rocking one of the most iconic shirts in Survivor history, shouting out Bob Barker.
If Bubba goes back, listen, Drew Carey, we can get the shirt made. I have a guy. We can get, he's not going to Bob Barker again. Excuse me. I have a fun fact about Mia. I told them in Survivor casting that I was going to try to name the merge tribe Galio Telzana, which is our last name. I was going to just lie and say it was something. It's not. And again, it is a joke that is only funny for me and would not have, like, it kills with.
Two can play. Listen, count me as your second.
Yeah.
I would have loved that because that is the deep pull that only a certain amount of the fan base would absolutely adore. Like, it would be even better if you did it backwards.
Me, you, and Christine, who hosts the Vanuatu podcast, we would have had, our group chat would have been lit, but
oh my God,
unfortunately did not happen.
That would have been an island of fire.
Listen, this group is not, it's a great group. They are probably very, I'm sure they're great people. What, Lisa, I'd like to speak to Lisa.
Sure.
Lisa, if Lisa plays, Lisa is what? How old now? 64. If Lisa plays in New Era Survivor, immediately the most loved person, I think, from the pregame, from the Redmond League, from everything. Like, Lisa would have it. And, and I'm sure she had it to a degree in 2004 also. But Lisa is like the kind of person that, I mean, I'm, very active. I see all the tweets in the Survivor Twitter community. We would all be obsessed with Lisa. I say that not knowing what Lisa has been up to lately. I'm not co-signing that if it's not great. But right now I don't know, and it's great.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa, also the winner of Rob's, I think, the moniker behind his TOS award, right, for like the player he will remember the least on the season. For whatever reason, that is Lisa Kiefer. But yeah, I enjoyed Lisa's presence as well. She was a little in over her head, I think, in terms of, again, being up against the women that she was a part of.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that was just a very specific set of circumstances.
Is Lisa more? I mean, is Lisa less memorable than Brady? I feel like
That's the
Brady
thing,
is
yeah.
like
I mean, Brady did climb the pole.
he climbed the pole, you know.
Which I would say, Brady climbed a pole on Islands of Fire, but I feel like on Fire Island, you're dancing around different types of poles.
And you or I is not getting that invite. Maybe perhaps.
Happy Pride, everybody. Happy Pride.
Here we are. But listen, and what a group. I mean, I think that the Vanuatu really again, we're looking at the first 4-5 boots right now of you can watch the premiere. The premiere is fantastic. They
premiere
came
is very fun.
They did watch Brooke get booted, and then you can skip 2, 3, and 4. Jump in on episode 5. It really is. You'll love it. But you can kind of yada yada over these couple. But Dolly's very interesting. Again, just is the swing vote, can't make a decision. We all just vote on Dolly. I think that's it's a fun 2-episode arc.
And I think it was a nice precursor to, again, kind of the hot mess tribe that was the women, of being able to unite for a certain portion of time, but be so invariably cracked in so many terms at the center of it. Well, Brandon, time has come. So we've done a lot of, I think, maybe more so than any of our previous seasons, definitive pros and cons to these people on our short list. Because again, given the reputation behind Vanuatu and its players, I would not say there are really a lot of slam dunks in particular when it comes to just thinking about the meta of it all. So this is really going to come down to, I think, how much are we leaning into the wish part of wish list? I think the one thing we can agree upon, as I mentioned before, since I'm mandating my own quota here of at least one person per season, Eliza is that guarantee from the season.
Yeah. Throw her on there. Absolutely. I mean, it makes sense. Fully makes sense. Again, whether Eliza is playing on season 50, clips of Eliza are going to be on season 50. No doubt, Ski. So if that's not an indicator of who from this season would likely become a player, I don't know what is. So yeah.
Plus, I didn't realize she only played the game at 21, so she's obviously 41 now, which is, compared to, again, the group that we're bringing in up to this point, she is the youngest person, I believe, who's been put on the list.
I think Tracy Hughes-Wolf got voted out on day 21, if that's anything.
Okay, good. Now I remember. I'm like Jake. I can only remember things if you reference the day in Survivor Micronesia.
Yeah. Listen, aren't we all?
All right, so let's talk about some other people. Brandon, why don't you offer somebody up that we can discuss?
I mean, again, is it a long shot? Certainly. But would I like to see Chris come back more than maybe any other? I could cry more than any other person that's been on Survivor in the last 25 years. Yes. I mean, it would be so much fun for me. And again, I don't know how a new era cast reacts to Chris. I don't know how the viewing audience reacts to Chris. I mean, it doesn't seem like it was a slam dunk last time, especially you have Tom, who wins the season after, who is universally beloved. Chris was not warranted that same thing, right? But would I love to see it? Oh my God, I'd love to see. Oh my God. I mean, it's there's genuinely, and this is not me speaking in hyperbole, which I do often. I do not think there's a single person in Survivor I would like to see for a round 2 than Chris. So my nomination is Chris.
I'll accept the nomination. Look, is it wishful thinking? I would say so. But look, I think if you're comparing him to a Richard Hatch in terms of, okay, is poison will never be brought back, I think it's a much milder form of poison. I think it's just more so Jeff looks back a certain way upon that season and not with pride. And who knows, maybe in a certain audience, in a certain room at a certain time, you talk about before lunch, maybe he could be convinced of, we forget that this guy was wheeling and dealing so hard. Yeah. He could be fun bringing back into this hyper gaming new era on the show. So I want to throw him on there if for no other reason than to see how he would do in a poll as well, because I believe it was maybe 10 years ago, Rob did a poll of who are the best Survivor players. Chris Daugherty came in the top 20, which is quite surprising.
Yeah. For somebody who, again, has been out of the Survivor lexicon. Again, and this isn't a guy who does podcasts. This isn't a guy that anybody in this world hears from, right? For him to still have permeated a top 20 of a list like that of best players ever. I mean, it's a testament to him, and it's a testament to how good he is. And again, is he good in 2025? Who knows? But let's see it. I'm ready to see it.
So the other spot that I'm thinking about is honestly between Twiila and Amy. I feel like I know where you lean if I would ask you to pick here, but give me your candidate here.
So, I mean, I think here, and I think Amy's fantastic. Amy had done a round 2, obviously could have been more ideal in terms of longevity or even more of an impact overall in the season. I think Twila's got stuff in the tank.
Mhm.
I think Twyla is also an easier yes. I'm
Yeah.
sure Amy would go, but I think Twyla, Twyla's had it offered and then pulled back and then offered and then pulled back. Like, and I mean, I've not been asked back yet. I mean, 50. I'm kidding. But I
Yeah,
know that
well, Brandon, wait like 9 weeks until we get to 45.
God forbid. I know, like, just having talked to folks and having read folks, their testimonials, getting that call and then not going
Yeah.
sucks. And it doesn't matter how far you go in the season. Or how far you go in the casting process, rather. So Twyla's got gas in the tank if we want Twyla. And listen, nobody wants Twyla more than me. I mean, I really, I think it would be so much fun. I think, and again, in a different vein, I think I'm pretty confident in the way that, like, people wouldn't react super kindly to Chris maybe in 2024. I do not think that about Twyla. I think
Mm.
Twyla comes in and I think Twyla's a hit. I mean, I think especially now with just the way that the world has changed in terms of, like, the viewing audience has changed. I think Twyla is a slam dunk. You put her on there, whether she's there for 3 days or 26, like, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, so the big question I have is I would love to put Twyla on the list. I think the better question is, like, listen, the 3 has been a suggestion at best. We brought back 4 for Borneo. We brought back 4 for Marquesas. I think the larger question that I'm really mulling over is there enough to put Amy on the list? Because I do think, to your point, she's been away for a while, and I think, unlike Eliza, I don't know, like, how much staying power there has been in terms of the memories of Survivor history. I do see your point that maybe just from a way to save airfare, she might be more likely to appear on AU than 50. But are there enough legs there, in your opinion, to put Amy on the list?
Well, what's interesting is you think about, again, what I had said about Jeff, and this 50 is a celebration of the first 25 years of the show. If you look in terms of, like, if you call it, again, you wouldn't call it this because it's a dumb name, but like Survivor, like impact, like who had an
Mhm.
impact on the lexicon
Game
of
changers?
Survivor? Game changer. I think they should do that. It sounds great. I would make some edits to the cast, but fine. I think that Amy is, like, for the time that she was on. I mean, again, first LGBT woman on Survivor. First, I believe this is covered in Vanuatu, and I'm sure, I think Amy talked about it on the Pride Has Spoken. Like, they don't show her and her girlfriend kissing. They show
Mhm.
them hugging, and they cut, and it's a very noticeable cut, and then they're not together. Like, I think that Amy represents something in the Survivor world that is
Mm.
the first. She's a Mount Rushmore of something. And I do see it again. If Survivor 50 is this huge celebration of these impactful people on the show, there is a case to be made for Amy, certainly.
Okay. You've convinced me. I think you also talking about, to your point, the legacy, and especially now more than ever, I think celebrating, sexuality and, all those different types of stories too, between the wins of Jam Jam and Kenzie. I think it could make sense to maybe bring on somebody that did break so many barriers for that
Absolutely.
on Survivor. So listen, I'm good to put Amy through here. This, again, Vanuatu is a very fun cast. Again, especially the post-merge group. So I'm more than happy to put 4 on here. I did have a random spare question, Brandon. I
Yeah.
wanted to get your thoughts on. Now, forgive me if I'm gonna, like, reopen Pandora's box here, but I don't know if you know this. Kelly Goldsmith, who was on Survivor Africa, was responsible for casting Survivor Vanuatu,
Yes.
or at least casting, like, a few people on it, including the aforementioned Amy. We chose to leave her left. Left her off the ballot for Survivor Africa. We feel like maybe it was a bit too much inside with the casting stuff. I have, in the interim, realized that she has come close to getting cast, whether it was All Stars, apparently Blood versus Water. She just needed somebody to be on with her. I don't want to go back on what Jason Reed said, but I'd love a second opinion here, because I've certainly been up at night thinking it over as to, like, okay, should I add a 4th for Africa and put her on alongside Lex, Clarence, and T-Bird?
If there's one thing I love in this world, it's a survivor named Kelly who's graduated from Yale. I'm a big fan of that variety. I know Kelly Goldsmith fits all those criteria. I'm with it. And again, I think that I love hearing the stories about, like, again, I watched All Stars at 11. I've watched it a couple of times since. Like, the almost on All Stars is so fun for me to think about. And
Mhm.
Kelly Goldsmith was, again, a leading name who just ended up not going. I think was there on location, and maybe, or she
Yeah,
was.
she apparently, like, was told, and again, I'm finding all this out after the fact, so maybe this is sort of informed my opinion, that she basically, like, was told she was going to be on and, like, quit her job and everything. Got flown and was at the airport, I think, and then was told, like, no, I think it was either Sheehan or Jenna was going to be on, and so she wasn't. And The rumor is that she was kind of offered this casting spot in season 9 as kind of like a mea culpa. Again, I think there might be a chance that she is too inside, but again, like this is very much pre-Tannenbaum, so like it was
Yeah.
only for one season. I think Kelly, we didn't talk about this in Africa, but like could have a lot of potential as someone who is intelligent and snarky to
Yes.
boot
Yeah.
as well. And so it seems like she said she would be down. She said as long as it worked out schedule wise and that she learned how to swim ahead of time, then she would do it. So listen, I'm happy to continue to just break every rule in the book and maybe retroactively put Kelly on her because this would be probably the last time I'd be able to bring her up in conversation.
Yeah. Again, I forget who I made the point about, but like some people are going to be forever lost to the first 10 seasons of the show, and definitively there are people that will not be, right? There are people that will be there from those 10 seasons, maybe one time, maybe two time, who knows? And if this is the chance to get Kelly on the ballot, get Kelly on the ballot. Listen,
All right,
I'm
so
in.
there we go. Yeah, it's a first for the wish list. We've actually technically added 5 people to the ballot here. We have Chris Doherty, Twyla Tanner, Eliza Orlins, Amy Cusick, and back in the days of Africa, Kelly Goldsmith. Last thing I want to do, Brandon, is assign a wild card. Here, of course, we have so many other random reality shows out there. Now, JP technically was ahead of this for me by being on
Yeah.
the short-lived Fox program Solitary. But if there's another member of the Vanuatu cast that you would want to see on another type of show instead of Survivor, what would it be?
Now my answer is Leanne, but I
Mhm.
don't know what I want to see Leanne do. Like I think roaring on the traitors is hysterical. Maybe we do that. I don't know. I really, really like Leanne. And again, I don't think Survivor is maybe happening at some point, but if she were, they have so many shows now. There's so many
Yeah.
shows that are casting people from wherever, like Solitary ahead of its time, randomly grabbing JP. Who knows if we don't
Mhm.
see Leanne pop up on something. I think I think she's around. I've never interfaced with her, but I see her post stuff. Like I think she has, maybe she's in the world at some capacity. So,
What
you
is
want to
what
throw
is what does she do for a living?
I also think that
Leanne Slaby, what is she up to?
I think that she's in television production, but I could be wrong also. I know
Okay.
I think she's somewhere in that world. So
Yeah.
maybe competing is out of the question for Leanne Slaby. But I really, again, watching it when I was 11 to watching it many times since then, I really, really liked Leanne. And whether that's just Leanne just comes and hangs out on the podcast, like sure, I'll take that. I want to see Leanne do something. And if that's interfacing with people on a thing, then I'm hell yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to. So she's talking in her quarantine questionnaire about she had been doing commercials and got the acting bug. And since I basically had to quit my life to go on the show, there seemed to be no better time. She talked about running a marathon. So because I would think otherwise, like maybe she's on some of these like specialized career shows,
Sure.
like a Tough as Nails. Maybe that's going along with the blue collar theming, but that's not Leah necessarily.
No, I mean, but hey, listen. I mean, like, if she's acting, maybe we bring back Who Done It. Where's the Who Done It vehicle? Maybe she's a person who is on Who Done It as an actor. We don't know.
All right. Well, Brandon, tomorrow it is time to go to battle as we will pick our soldiers in the fight on this short list as we go to Survivor Palau. To your point, people were ready in the moment to move on to Vanuatu, and in the moment, Palau was considered one of the most epic seasons due to the decimation of Oolong, due to the domination of Tom Westman. But who amongst this cast will come back for a second, a third, maybe even a fourth time? We shall see as we will close out week 2 of the Survivor 50 Wishlist series tomorrow with Haley Strong covering Survivor Palau. Should be a really fun time. I always want to ask my guests, Brandon, who on your short list would you have from
Karen,
Palau if you could help it?
Karen, and don't even do the podcast. Do
You talk
plugs
about
for Katie
Leanne. I
Rayner.
hear she's a very good actress.
Oh my god, I think Karen is so good. If I could have, I just talked such an I'm retracting my hyperbole about Chris. Put Karen on every season of the show.
That makes one of us. But I'll let my Karen opinions be known tomorrow as I talk with Haley. Of course, make sure you
Yeah.
don't miss a second of this series. Podcast drops 6 a.m. Eastern every weekday at robhasawebsite.com/survivor feed and on YouTube at 10 a.m. every morning at robhasawebsite.com/YouTube. Of course, I know you're going to be letting us know your thoughts on the people that we picked now from multiple seasons. Brandon, anything you want to plug right now?
No, go listen to Stanawatu. If you haven't listened to
Hmm.
Stanawatu, Christine of the Bitter Jurors podcast did a
Yes.
whole every episode recap of Stanawatu. I think in 2022. I listened to it when it was out. And I think that she interviewed a couple people. I think she interviewed Eliza, maybe one or two more. Go listen to it. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
So
and I
that's
do believe, Brandon, I think you shouted out Vanuatu in my interview that I did when you were talking about how you're like that stan of Edge of Extinction, basically.
yeah. I don't know who's doing the Edge of Extinction one of this, but I'll get in contact with that.
Yes, I
I
was
have
gonna say,
strong
get their
takes.
ear.
Yeah, but listen, the Vanuatu is fantastic. Christine is fantastic. It's really, really good. If you're looking to watch a season throughout the summer, again, you can skip 4 episodes. I'm telling you to skip 4 episodes of this. Like, it's not a heavy lift. Watch Vanuatu and then accompany it with a very nice podcast.
All right. Well, tomorrow we move on from Vanuatu as we check out who from Palau is going to make our final ballot. Thank you all so much for listening, Brandon. Thank you so much for coming on. Until tomorrow, everybody, take care. Bye bye.